Morning, March 6th, 1944. 23,000 feet over Germany, the sky is anything but peaceful. A column of B-17 flying fortresses grinds toward Berlin, engines droning, contrails carving white scars into the cold blue. Below, flak blooms in black puffs. This is the 8th Air Force's first massive daylight raid on the German capital, a maximum effort mission. Hundreds dispatched, dozens won't come home. At the very back of one fortress that slipped a little behind its combat box, Staff Sergeant Jack Donovan lies on his stomach in the tail turret, knees tucked up, boots braced, face pressed into cold plexiglas. The tail is a metal bubble barely big enough for a man. Frost halos his oxygen mask. His fingers rest on the twin butterfly triggers of his 50 cal machine guns. Every vibration in the airframe comes straight into his bones. He knows his ship is in trouble. Leads pulling ahead, the pilot mutters over interphone. We're sagging low. Low and behind is no place to be. Donovan sweeps the sky. 3 o'clock to 9, high to low. Contrails, friendly shapes, flak smears. Then he sees them. Tail to crew, he says, suddenly calm. Bandits 6 o'clock high, looks like a dozen. 109s. Tiny specks sliding into a loose fan directly behind their isolated fortress. Classic Luftwaffe move. Ignore the big box for a moment and pick off the bomber that can't keep up. In training, Donovan was taught exactly what to do. Short bursts, conserve ammo, don't open fire until they're close and filling the sight. Staring at that tightening swarm, he decides he's going to break every rule they ever gave him. Instead of aiming at one airplane, he picks a point in empty sky, the line those fighters have to fly through to shoot, and prepares to turn it into a tunnel of fire. The navigator sees him working the charging handles early and snaps, "Jack, what are you doing?" If the later stories are even half true, the answer is simple. He's about to spend 4 minutes rewriting how bombers and fighters fight each other. The B-17 wasn't supposed to need heroes like Donovan. In theory, it was the hero. American planners built a strategy around it. Daylight precision bombing. Send waves of heavily armed fortresses over enemy territory in tight combat boxes and let them fight to the target and back. Hit factories, rail yards, oil plants, and choke off the enemy's ability to wage war. The airplane fits that vision. 4 big engines, a deep bomb bay, and all around it, guns, chin, cheek, top, ball, waist, tail, up to 1350 calls with overlapping arcs. Half the crew is there just to shoot back. In formation, on paper, no fighter pilot in his right mind should go near them. But on the other side of the sky is the Luftwaffe, and they've been learning too. Fighters like the Messerschmitt Bf-109 and Focke-Wulf 190 guys are small, fast, and mean. A 109 carries a cannon firing, explosive shells through the prop hub and machine guns in the nose. A short burst can tear a bomber's wing apart. Early on, German pilots tried attacking from behind, one at a time, and paid for it. So they changed tactics. Aces helped develop head-on and front-quarter attacks that strike the fortress's weaker arcs, diving in waves so every gunner has too much to track at once. Later, they mix in stern and quartering attacks, coming from multiple angles to overwhelm the box. The B-17s themselves are part of the problem. The whole defensive concept relies on tight formation flying. When it works, each bomber's guns cover its neighbors, creating a hedge of fire. When flak rips into an engine, weather scatters the groups, or a pilot slips out of position. That neat box develops gaps. and gaps are what fighter pilots live for. By early 1944, bomber crews have seen what happens when things go wrong. Missions to Schweinfurt and Regensburg have cost dozens of aircraft in a day, gunners doing everything by the book. They've watched fortresses roll over trailing flame, seen parachutes, or not, bloom in the sky. They know that once a B-17 starts to straggle, it turns from flying fortress into floating target. On March 6th, heading for Berlin, Donovan's ship is drifting right into that danger zone. Back at gunnery school, everything was neat. Donovan sat in plywood mock-ups and watched grainy training films of fighters crossing a screen. Instructors barked over the rattle of practice guns. Call out the bandit by clock position and range. Short bursts only, 3 seconds max. Don't chase your tracers. Don't spray and pray. They drilled special position firing techniques, teaching gunners how to lead a target when both shooter and target are moving. They warned constantly about friendly fire and ammunition. A tail gun might have 800 rounds per barrel. Sounds like a lot until you realize it has to last the whole mission. The manuals were clear. Firing at very long range is a waste. Low hit probability, risk of overheating the guns, danger of running dry when you really need them. Then Donovan started flying over Germany. He saw combat boxes come apart when flak tore through a formation, leaving 1 or 2 bombers low and slow. Fighters smelled that weakness and dove on the stragglers like sharks on a wounded fish. On one mission, a fortress just ahead took a hit, slipped out of place, and couldn't climb back. Within minutes, a pack of 109s pounced. The gunners did everything as taught, called the attacks, waited for solid sight pictures, fired textbook bursts. It didn't matter. Donovan watched that ship burn in midair. Another day, a rookie tail gunner bragged about following the rules perfectly on his first engagement. A week later, his bunk was empty. The lesson Donovan took was simple and bitter. Doing everything right did not guarantee survival, especially once your bomber fell out of formation. He also noticed something in gun camera film and debriefs. When German fighters attacked from the rear in groups, 3 in a V or a loose chain, there was always a moment when they were locked in. To put accurate fire into a bomber, a fighter had to commit to a relatively straight attack run. For a few seconds, they all flew through the same slice of space. The manuals told him to shoot at airplanes. Donovan started thinking about shooting at the air itself. The invisible corridors the fighters had to use. The night before the Berlin raid, a projector whirs in a cold hut, while gunners watch gun camera film frame by frame. On the wall, a bomber's tail fills the bottom of the picture. Above it, specks grow into fighters. 3 Bf-109s slide into formation, then dive as one, their paths almost overlapping. The intelligence officer taps the screen. "This is where they're committed," he says. "They can't jink much without ruining their aim. This is your kill window, short, controlled bursts." The film runs. Tracers reach out from the tail too late. Fighters streak past and vanish. When the lights come up, Donovan stays in his seat, thinking. Frank, the waist gunner, nudges him. "You look like a man who just lost a bet." "Look where they are right before they fire," Donovan says. "Not the planes, the line they're on. It's the same for all of them." "Yeah," Frank shrugs. "That's when we shoot." "But we wait till they're close," Donovan says, "which means we're always chasing them. What if, instead of tracking one fighter and firing late, we pick that line ahead of time and start filling it with lead before they get there?" Frank stares. "You mean just hose the sky?" Not the sky, Donovan says. The tunnel. Frank shakes his head. You'll fry your barrels, burn all your ammo, and the pilot'll kill you before the Germans get a chance. He's not wrong. The idea runs against everything they've been taught. It requires the pilot to hold the bomber reasonably steady during the first attack, exactly when instinct says to yank it around. It uses precious ammunition at ranges every manual calls ridiculous. But Donovan keeps coming back to one cold calculation. A B-17 that's already straggling under a dozen 109s is probably doomed if those fighters can make 2 or 3 clean passes. Maybe the only way to live is to make sure they never get that clean first run. Before engine start on March 6th, Donovan leans into his turret, takes a grease pencil, and marks a tiny point on his glass sight, just above where a standard lead on a tail attack would fall. That's where he'll hold his fire if the worst happens. He doesn't tell the pilot the whole plan. Over interphone, he just says, "Skipper, if we get jumped back there, I might need you to keep her steady a little longer than you like. Just keep 'em off my tail, Jack." The pilot grunts. Over Berlin, the flak is a wall. Donovan feels the ship jump and shudder as bursts go off close. When they drop their bombs and turn for home, one engine's rough. The pilot has to juggle power to keep them in the air. Slowly, the lead box pulls away. "Tail to pilot," Donovan reports. "We're sagging low and back again." "I know," the pilot replies. "She's giving me all she's got." The gap opens between their fortress and the main formation. It feels like someone letting go of your hand in a crowd. Then he spots them. "Bandits, 6 high," he says. "A lot of them, at least 12, coming straight for us." The fighters spread into a loose fan, sunlight glinting off canopies as they swing in behind the lonely straggler. The interphone crackles. "Waist here, I see 'em. Ball turret lining up on our 6. Radio, Jesus." Donovan tunes it out. He watches the 109s settle into their dives, noses lowering, wings barely twitching as they commit. For a few seconds, just like in the film, they're locked on a predictable line. "Pilot," he says quietly, "keep her steady. Now." Instead of waiting for the lead 109 to fill his sight, Donovan swings his guns slightly above and ahead of the fighter's projected path, right where his grease pencil mark sits. The range is crazy. Any instructor would be screaming at him to hold fire. He squeezes the triggers. The tail explodes into recoil. The twin 50s hammer. A stream of tracers leaps into the empty air. Donovan walks the line onto his mark and holds it there, cutting a glowing lane in the sky. From the Germans' perspective, the straggling bomber they expected to pick apart suddenly turns into a searchlight of tracers, firing long and steady at a spot they haven't reached yet. The lead 109 keeps coming. He trusts training and odds. His nose moves right down that tunnel. Donovan sees flashes on the engine cowling as rounds find home. Coolant sprays back. The fighter wobbles, breaks off, and drops away, trailing a white plume. The second 109 tries to yank clear at the last second, but he's too late. He jinks straight into his wingman's path. For a sick moment, the two aircraft kiss wingtips, and then both go spinning out of formation, tumbling past the bomber. The rest of the attacking fan reacts on instinct, not doctrine. Some pull high, some dive under, some shear off. The neat, timed attack disintegrates. Now Donovan shifts gears. He eases off the triggers to cool the barrels, then goes back to shorter bursts, snapping at individual fighters as they flash through the chaos. A 109 showing its belly as it climbs away. Another crossing low into the ball turret's field of fire. The waist gunners join in, turning the air around the fortress into a churning cage of tracers. What was supposed to be one clean, devastating pass turns into a messy, fragmented brawl. It feels like forever. In reality, the intense part lasts maybe 4 minutes, broken into bursts and gaps as the fighters try, fail, and then think better of making another straight-in run on this suddenly vicious target. Finally, there's nothing behind them but empty sky and 2 dark smears where damaged fighters went down. Everyone waits for the next wave. It doesn't come. "Anybody hit?" the pilot asks. "Minor damage, a few holes. No one's seriously hurt. They're still flying west." "Tail," the navigator says slowly. "What the hell did you just do?" Donovan looks at the smoking barrels and tries to slow his breathing. "I shot where they had to be," he says, "not where they were." The debriefing hut is crowded and stale, air full of sweat, coffee, and smoke. When it's their turn, the intelligence officer runs through flak, bomb run, fighter strength. Then, "Describe your fighter encounters." The pilot glances back. "Donovan, tell him," Jack explains. "The formation of 109s, the way they committed, the range he started firing at, the way the attack unraveled." He admits he opened up early, way early. "You ignored the range guidelines?" the officer asks. "Yes, sir, on purpose. They all had to come through that corridor. I figured if we put the fire there first, they'd have to fly through it." Another gunner snorts. "You mean you hosed the sky?" "Not the sky," Donovan says. "Just the bit they couldn't avoid." What saves him from a chewing out isn't his explanation. It's the pilot and co-pilot backing him up. "We watched them break apart," the pilot says. "First 3 never got a proper shot. The rest came in ragged. I'm not saying everyone should do it all the time, but today it kept us alive." The officer scribbles notes. Gunners from other crews lean in. That night in the mess, the story makes the rounds. At first, Donovan is the idiot who nearly melted his guns. Then, the crazy tail gunner who scared a dozen 109s off a straggler. By the time it filters back to gunnery schools in England, the tale has picked up numbers and legend. But underneath, something real sticks. Instructors reviewing fresh gun camera film. Notice bombers that disrupt attacks early, even at less than ideal range, often fare better than those waiting for perfect shots. Quietly, lectures start to shift. Ammo discipline is still hammered home, but new ideas appear. Don't give him a clean run. Controlled long-range fire can be suppression, not just killing. Waist and tail gunners begin to experiment with earlier opening fire and pre-calculated points, especially on stragglers. They don't all go as far as Donovan, but more of them think in terms of lanes and tunnels, not just individual planes. On the German side, pilots report some bombers firing too early and too accurately, forcing them to alter approach angles or break off. Combined with tighter formations and growing P-51 escort, massed, straight-in attacks on B-17 groups become less attractive. No one writes Donovan doctrine in a manual. There's no medal that says invented tunnel of fire technique. Yet in the evolving dance between bomber and fighter, the influence of anonymous gunners who dared to break the rules is there. Jack Donovan is a composite of many real men. In this story, he finishes his tour, 25 or 30 missions, collects his air medal, maybe a DFC, and goes home. In reality, thousands of tail and ball turret gunners flew those missions. Many didn't live long enough to count their kills. After the war, most went back to ordinary lives: factories, farms, classrooms. The insane things they tried in the air became stories for reunions and kitchen tables, if they talked at all. Historians argue over kill claims and tactics, and they're right. Numbers like 12 109s in 4 minutes are almost certainly exaggerated. But the legend carries a truth the paperwork misses. In those freezing tail turrets, kids barely out of high school weren't just following manuals. They were improvising, finding new ways to use the firepower in their hands to keep their crews alive. The air war over Europe wasn't changed only by famous aces in sleek fighters. It was also shaped by nameless gunners in the backs of bombers, willing to gamble on an idea. The aircraft, the mission date, the tactics. That's rooted in real history. Our gunner and his exact tally are composites, dramatized so we can see the war through one gun sight. If you want the hard details, go to combat reports, museum archives, veteran memoirs, and serious histories of the 8th Air Force and the Luftwaffe. If you want more forgotten World War II stories like this, about small, desperate ideas that changed big battles, hit like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And if your family has its own impossible story from a bomber crew or a gunner, we'd love to hear it.